Welcome back to an all new episode of the All Immigrant Podcast. I'm your host, Abin. I am once again joined by my co host, Vivek. It has been an age since we have done this because a lot has happened. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? How's your recovery from dengue? Or is it called dengue? I don't know. Dengue.
I, I still don't know the correct pronunciation really because some countries say dengue, some countries say dengue, some countries say dengue, like us in Bangalore, right? So it's been a horrid month. I had what do you call it? I had two very bad weeks of dengue, and it completely knocked me out. And the whole month has been a bit of a slog when it comes to recovery. But I'm back. The podcast is back, and I'm looking forward to kicking things off again.
Good. No, I'm excited too. I was just telling you right before we started recording that I feel like, this is where I'm in my element. So I'm very excited. We have a fantastic guest with us today once again. And Abhin, would you like to introduce him?
Of course. So on this week's episode, I'd like to introduce you to Vrishin Subramaniam, the founder of CapitalWE, a virtual fee-only financial planning firm dedicated to providing crucial financial guidance and support to immigrants working in the dynamic tech industry. Originally hailing from the city of New Delhi, Vishen embarked on his American journey at the age of 17, where he enrolled at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Over the past decade, his life has unfolded in a remarkable way, from serving as a technology consultant to residing in 7 different cities, to finding love and companionship with his wife Sharanya, and even discovering a passion for scuba diving that led to obtaining a diving license. We'll come back to that later. Now calling the DC area, specifically Arlington, home for just under a year, Vision has made it his mission to make financial planning more accessible, particularly for individuals navigating the intricacies of H-1B or green card status. At CapitalWE, he's breaking down barriers, rejecting the conventional suit and tie approach, and creating a space where financial empowerment meets the unique need of the immigrant experience. Join us as we delve into Vision's journey, exploring the intersections of culture, finance, and the pursuit of a dream on this week's episode. Vishen, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Abhin and Vivek. Glad to be here.
Wow, that's quite a heavy introduction. Oh, there's so many things I want to ask you about, but I'm sure we're gonna jump into all of it. So I think the best place to start is the beginning. So Vrishan, you were obviously a South Indian, born and brought up in Delhi, which is, for those who don't know, in North India. And you moved to Bangalore, which is again South India. You spent a few years there, then you made a jump to college in the US. So obviously very very different set of experiences culturally for you, as well as an overall personal journey. So maybe take us through some of those early days growing up, and talk us through your school and college experience in India and US respectively.
Yeah. Um, I don't think you think much about culture growing up. It's just something that happens to you, right? So, growing up as a South Indian or I guess South Indian in Delhi, you know that you're slightly different because the language that you speak at home is different from what's spoken around. But I moved fairly young, so I adapted quickly to that, and then like to identify as a Delhi boy, if you will. I know there are other stereotypes associated with that, so that's the unfortunate downside. But and Delhi was home for me. Feel very comfortable. The food is obviously amazing. And then you kind of went to like a local school, so not like an international curriculum and things like that. So very much steeped in the culture of Delhi and met everyday folk from Delhi. Um, but I think somewhere around 10th grade, when we had board exams, my parents were a little jaded with like the Indian education system, so they decided to uh, put me in put me into an international school, and that's how I ended up in Bangalore. Because I think they wanted me to have the complete experience, so they put me in a boarding school, and Bangalore was a little bit of a bubble because boarding school in of itself is fairly isolated from the rest of the city, so you don't get to experience the culture or like understand what Bangalore is all about. And so that was just put your head down, focus on studies, try to get into college, basically. uh, a hard experience. And then just ended up in the US. And if you were to ask me how, I don't know. But when you're 17, life just happens to you, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I ended up in Urbana-Champaign to study electrical engineering.
And it's interesting. You said you went to boarding school. That's something that is, I think, Abin and I can't really relate to, because I think most of us lived in our respective parents' houses well into our 20s, and that's kind of how the norm is back in India. Obviously, the US is culturally different, but
Mhm.
so that's an interesting thing. I mean, going to boarding school at such a young age. I mean, I would love to just ask you one more question on that. How are your experiences in boarding school, specifically? At such a young age, talk us through some of the. Were there any experiences that you want to share? Any learnings that you had at that point in time, and also it gave you so much independence and the confidence to potentially move to the US. How did that dovetail into this? And maybe just walk us through a little bit more about that.
Boarding school is very different from staying at home, obviously. But I think it helps a lot with kind of understanding how to set a routine and following that. Boarding school that I went to was fairly regimented, so you didn't have a lot of like unstructured time to do whatever you want. But following a routine that is actually, in hindsight, an amazing routine, because you get to wake up early, you have to exercise, you you have to like eat breakfast at a certain time, and then you're studying, you come back, you study some more, then you eat, and then you like have leisure time, then you go to bed. And as an adult, that's pretty much the aspirational routine, if you will. So that prepares you. I felt like it prepared me well for this. But at 17, you don't care for such a routine. You want to have more unstructured time. You
Yeah.
want to be able to do things that you want. Um, and people are great. Like, if you're able to find the right set of people that you will click with, I think boarding school is a phenomenal place. Like, most of the people from boarding school are like lifelong friends, right?
Yeah.
So I know that that can be the case even when you're day scholars, but yeah, it just something about being through that whole uh, obstacle course, if you will, uh, really strengthens the bonds. And like I got involved in like a dance crew in school, so that went a long way towards kind of forging relationships and forging friendships and things like that. So on the other side, I mean, like, I don't know that if I were given an option again, I don't know whether I would do boarding school, because it was obviously just being thrown into the deep end and having to fend for yourself and learn all these skills from go from 0 to 100 really quickly. But yeah, I definitely feel like it has given me a lot of strength and discipline and resilience and friends.
Also, what you just described about going from 0 to 100 sounds like immigration. So, I mean, it ties in very well with your market and who you serve today. So that's great.
I'm just really surprised nobody has tried to package a boarding school life lesson coaching experience somewhere. It's like live like a boarding school student and wake up, and this is the routine you need to follow, given with the number of courses that are out there today.
I, I think that's just being an adult. Like, you're expected to do all those things as a functional adult. Not that we end up end up doing it.
Doing them, yeah.
No, I look back and I'm like, I I have not like woken up to do exercise at 6:30 in the morning ever in the last like 10-15 years. So it's I was like, I look back and I was like, those are the days I peaked in terms of like having a routine. So,
But see, that's the thing about boarding school, right? It makes you really disciplined in that period of time. But if it happens to you when you're too young, you may grow to despise it and you never want to do it again once you finish. That's the flip side of it. So it really depends on the person you are and on how you take that experience, I guess.
yeah. And like coming to the US, like you would know, right? You come here and then you're completely like on your own. You don't have any kind of structure. You have your classes which are optional, and then you can basically just do whatever you want as long as like you get a grade. So
Yeah, this that
definitely
actually it kind of leads into my next question, because about you've obviously you were in Delhi, and then you moved to Bangalore, which is a far more insulated experience,
hmm
and then you moved to Champaign, Illinois, right?
yeah.
And this is for all intents and purposes a college town.
hmm
So what was that experience like? Because you probably grew up around a lot of noise, a lot of hustle and bustle, and suddenly you're in this really quiet. I mean, it's a college town, so it's filled with people your age.
Yeah.
But was that what did that feel like for you?
I think it was a great experience. If I had, like, in hindsight, if I had gone to a big city for college, like, I would have failed miserably because there's
Mhm.
so many distractions and so many things to do. And like in Illinois, like, you're just in the middle of the cornfields and there's like 50 buildings and you're done. So it went a lot. I mean, it went a long way towards kind of helping me refocus myself on my academics and just kind of spending more time with the people that were around me. So, kind of similar to the boarding school experience, you have the same people that you're seeing day in, day out, partly because of the program that you study, and partly because, like, you don't have people that are not affiliated with college in the town.
Mm.
But I really liked it. It gave me a sense of first true winter, much more peaceful and quiet, smaller group of people. In hindsight, I would have actually picked a smaller college, somewhere like a Claremont, where the class sizes are much smaller, because Illinois is still a public college, and you tend to get lost in the class sizes where you have lectures of like 200, 300 people. And I feel like I would have benefited from having like the personalized attention of like a smaller class size.
It's interesting that you say that because invariably I had the same experience. Like when I moved to the US, I didn't move for school, I moved for work.
Hmm.
But I moved to a small city. I moved to Louisville, Kentucky, which is a few hundred miles south of where
Hmm.
you were. Um, and I think if I were to go back, I don't know if I would do things differently. I really enjoyed the fact that I was there for a few years because it helped me, for the lack of a better term, acclimatize with how the US is and how life is here. And it kind of gave me a little bit more. I mean, I feel like if I moved to Atlanta on day one or Chicago on day one, I'd be like, oh my God, what the hell is this traffic, man? And I would be so scared to even drive. And I, I think that it gave me a lot of like calm confidence and gave me a lot of time to kind of discover and figure out
Yeah.
things that I had to figure out for myself in the US when I first moved.
Hmm.
So I resonate with what you say. I completely understand and agree. I think that it's a great way to kind of get into the swing of things. And for
Yeah.
me personally, once I was in, I was like, okay, now I need a bigger city, and I am ready to kind of take on a bigger city.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
totally get it.
It's pretty wild how, like, given where you start your experience in the US as an immigrant, like, the outcomes like wildly vary, because like you have somebody who can move to like the San Francisco Bay Area and feels like they never left India. 'Cause there's so many Indians there, versus like moving to a smaller city where you actually get the American experience, if you will. Um,
Yeah.
I I had a family friend who I was talking to, and he was like, so I asked him, like, how did you pick where in the US you moved to, right? And he was like, oh yeah, I was just given like a Rolodex of people to call when I landed, and I landed in JFK, and I just called numbers, and the first four people didn't pick up, and the fifth person who picked up was like, my house is in California, like, can you come here? And that's how we ended up in LA.
Wow.
Like, it's pretty wild what
Wow.
different our experience is from the people that came in the 80s and 90s.
That's insane. One of my friends lives in Fremont, California, and he was telling me just last week that he's like, it's like Mumbai. You have like a vada pav guy on the road, like selling, and it's you basically feel like you're in proper Mumbai, and
Yeah.
that's hilarious.
Yeah, I lived in Jersey for a hot minute, and I did not know of the empire that was Patel Brothers. It was this huge grocery chain, and I was like, what the hell? What's happening? There's a pan guy on the street. It was a part of India I was never used to. 'Cause
Yeah.
even in Bangalore, very rarely do you find pan guys on streets.
Yeah.
So it was a very strange experience.
Yeah. But anyway, so you spoke about coming into college here, and then you obviously graduated. You did mention that I mean, or we did see on your profile that you had some difficulties finding a job post graduation.
Mhm.
And obviously, I think I personally didn't go through that experience, but I know a lot of people, a lot of
Mhm.
immigrants have gone through that, given the visa constraints, etc. So what are some of the issues you faced navigating the market? Maybe talk us through a little bit about that.
Yeah, I moved when the economy was good, so like completely different set of challenges. But when I had enrolled for the electrical engineering program, and then most of the people that came to hire in college were hiring for defense or like signal processing, which were mostly companies that required you to have citizenship and or government clearance, which if you're a foreign national don't have, right?
Yeah,
The other option then that I was faced with was to make a complete pivot to go into the computer engineering, computer science side of things, or just go ahead and study some more. I did not want to study anymore because I didn't feel like that was what I wanted to do at that point. And so I ended up just looking in the general domain of computer science, but because it was like classes that were incidental to my degree, like I was not well versed in it. So I struggled, like basically I graduated without a job in hand, and I had to move to the Bay Area and look for a job uh, for about like almost a month after. And it's it's very nerve wracking, right? Because you basically have only 60 days to find a job after you graduate, or like you have to like pack
yeah,
your stuff and leave. And there's such a tremendous like monetary investment, you
Mm.
there's it feels like there's so much on the line, right? And there's this inherent pressure to like either do well or like take the first thing that you get, which is what I ended up doing. It's not to
Yeah,
like
so I ended up graduating in 2020. It was a great time. So it was like I was in New York, and I was going up. And I
mm,
told the story before on the podcast.
yeah,
I went to college in New York, and I was going up to White Plains for an internship, and that just happened to be where the first case of COVID was reported. So overnight, like, my life changed, right? Because you were just like, oh,
yeah,
this. I mean, and suddenly it was just chaos. So I understand, because you're just. I don't think you as a person are prepared for that
hmm,
kind of rejection. Not because you're at fault for anything, not because you
yeah,
lack the qualifications, just because the visa rules are so strict and so constrained
yeah,
that it can be very it, how do I put this? It can be extremely disheartening
yeah,
for someone to keep repeatedly going through the process. I
mhm,
feel you and I, people like us, have at some point gone through something very similar. I'm sure Vivek's challenges have also been very different, and we've
mhm,
spoken about this on prior episodes. But you that monetary commitment hangs around your neck like a noose.
yeah,
So it really adds the pressure onto you. And for anyone who comes out of it on top, props, dude. I mean, you did what you had to do.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine the kids that have like enrolled in 2021 and 20, like assuming that
Mm.
the economy would like recover. And then like it just, I known of cases where they got offers, and then because of how 2022 was, like their offer was rescinded. So they had like gone through the entire program assuming that they did have a job lined up, and then that just fell through at the last minute. And surprisingly, the number of Indians that are coming to study abroad each year only seems to be trending upwards, which is like wild to me.
I think a lot of courses as well have kind of the MBA courses. My course, right towards the end, the
Mhm.
last semester, switched to a STEM program. So I think colleges know, because that, okay, the guys coming here, we're essentially the ones paying. So they're making it a lot more attractive. But with the way the laws are going, I think it's just a matter of time before they hit a wall. I'm saying,
Mhm.
I'm not going. That time might be in about 10 years or so. But up until then, the US will always be an attractive proposition, right, for many.
Yeah.
and it's interesting that I think a lot of people leave India coming to the US in search of a dream, the American dream, which I mean, I was recently sitting in a lecture on macroeconomics in school, in business school, where I am right now, also in addition to my job. So in that the prof is essentially talking about how the data doesn't any longer suggest that the so-called American dream, and he kind of proxied the American dream with first generational wealth, right? And he said that the first generation wealth has actually been dropping for immigrants since the 90s. So there's actually data which suggests that the American dream is no longer what it used to be, but I think there's a perception that it is what it is, that it is the dream that you can come in and you can create opportunity, and it's definitely true, but it's just less true compared to what it was in the 80s and 90s. So, but I just found it interesting that perception has kind of played such a dominant role in shaping how the world views a certain country in terms of immigration and opportunity.
I think that might be true for other demographics. I think for Indians, it still largely is the case where that you can come here and build a phenomenal life because
That's true.
of the education level
Yes.
there's a high skill, high education kind of pool that the Indian immigrants come from, right? And especially if you come from a middle class or an upper middle class background, um, you have the ability to kind of even catapult yourself
Yeah.
into a next level of like wealth earning capability, right? Where I've seen couples that are earning 400,000-500,000 dollars a year. Spoken to somebody who's earning $1 million a year, which is like you will not see that type of like income earning ability in India unless you do like a business, right? And
Correct.
then obviously there's also the cultural factors of like not having to live in the with the societal norms of being back home, right? Where there's inherent cultural expectations that you're trying to afford. So I know women that move here that are like extremely happy that they can like they're free to do what they want at night or like go where they please without having to like deal with stairs or
Yeah.
other
Yeah, that's
unruly.
fair. I mean, even I think a lot of family pressure happens, especially for women growing up in the Indian subcontinent, and it's. I'm not saying they don't like. I mean, they don't have it difficult when they move to the US, but I'd say a big weight is lifted off their shoulders because there's independence. They're not being their every action and move is not being judged
Yeah.
the way and over scrutinized. So I think it definitely plays a part.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on because I want to keep it to you for a bit. There's coming to CapitalWE, right? So was there something about personal finance and
Mhm.
immigrants that made you want to start the company? Was it a long-standing passion, or was there like an incident that you can kind of pinpoint to where the idea sparked into life?
Yeah, absolutely. Very much to do with all the experience with my life experiences before this, right? Where I um
Mm.
I basically moved to the Bay Area, started on like took the first job that I got, started on a salary of $75,000, which if you know anything about the Bay Area is not enough money. Had to get good about like we all like coming from India, we all know how to budget and save, but like had to get smart about money beyond that, which is like what does that look like and how can I ensure that like I live the life that I want to live if I am earning $75,000 in perpetuity, and learned about saving, like investing, all of that stuff. Saw other people who were earning 150,000, $200,000 right out of college making the same mistakes. And then the crystallizing moment was when one of my schoolmates basically came to me asking for help, right? So one of the smartest people I know went to all the top colleges in the US, and then did a PhD, was working at like a Silicon Valley startup, and then just had $80,000 of money sitting in a checking account. And then when I kind of help them out with like instructions, they came back 6 months later and they were like, it's very overwhelming, can you do it for me? And at that point it clicked that money is not just the checklist of do all this and you'll be fine. It's also the emotional aspect of it, where we are very like there's a lot of money scripts and emotion tied to money, and a lot of people are not able to kind of overcome that. So Capital V was in some sense an attempt to help rewire an immigrant's brain, uh, around like to change the scripts around money.
It makes sense because there's so much. I mean, it's really difficult to navigate this in all honesty, right? I mean, I'll just share a quick experience, but we were trying to figure out how to do this optimally, right? And there's so many options. There's 401k, Roth, IRA, Roth IRA. It's like backdoor. I'm like, man, there's like too much going on here. And so we said, okay, maybe let's talk to a wealth manager, right? So we went to Northwestern Mutual and we kind of spoke to them, and they laid out like a whole plan. And then they tried selling us insurance, which I subsequently discovered was a terrible, terrible investment to make in the US. At least the whole life portion of it. Yeah, the term, I guess, is debatable. But and I said, oh, this is just crazy. It shouldn't be this hard. So I personally have experienced the challenges that you're talking about. Immigrants. I mean, I don't think it's specific to immigrants, but I get it. Like immigrants more so because we don't even know, we haven't grown up with this stuff, right? So it's kind of, everything is different for us. As an adult, we're trying to figure out all of this, and it's really challenging. When inflation, I mean, when the inflation's been crazy for the last couple of years, and we were trying to figure out where to keep money, because we want to keep some liquid cash, right? But we don't want to just leave it in a checking account where it's earning like 0.1%, right? So it's just been a nightmare, honestly. And I think what you're solving is really a problem.
Yeah. The to piggyback of what you said, right? There are like several challenges here where the money scripts that you have or that you're taught in India are completely different from the US, right? Debt is bad in India, it's considered bad, you're not supposed to take it. Debt is what like runs the country in America.
Yeah.
Um, and then secondly, your as an immigrant, your understanding of the system is obviously completely like different than like if you were brought up and you were familiar with all of these. But also, your visa consideration plays a big point. Like, does it make sense to put money into a 401k if you go back, if you get kicked out of the country? What happens to the money that you've invested in accounts that are locked up till retirement? Or like, how is the tax treatment if you end up going back? All of those are questions I'm trying to help solve. And then the last part is obviously just being fee only, where a lot of people that end up seeking help end up going to a big name like a Morgan Stanley or a Northwestern Mutual, where all of them are pretty much selling you products. And there is like a misaligned incentive there, right? Where I, like, as a fee only advisor, I only get compensated by the clients that I work with, which means that like I'm trying to tie my incentives to the other person's as closely as possible, right? It's not like I'll give you a discounted rate on the planning and then like I end up making money by selling you some products or insurance or something in the back end. So that was the third piece that I see a lot, where people are asking for help for free because Indians don't want to pay for advice, but like they ended up buying something that was recommended to them without having the full context of what happens.
I mean, so I guess that's an interesting point you made, and it's a question which is not on the questions we sent you, but how do you charge charge money for a service to a market that doesn't want to pay for anything? How do you build that value
Yeah.
upfront in a way that they see the value in paying for it?
Yeah, I think the idea is to like work with people that need help. So a lot of people need help, and like a lot of people are like a lot of people need help, but a lot of them don't want to pay, right? So I'm looking for to work with people that understand the value inherently. Like, it's not something that can be explained, because a lot of the value of financial planning is soft dollar ROI, in terms of like I can tell you not to do something and that like saves you a bunch of money. And so quantifying that in dollar terms is really hard. But the idea is that I work with people that have a severe burning problem, that come to me with a severe burning problem at this current point in time, and that have the ability or would like for to be able to pay somebody to solve it. And in the universe of, I would say, almost a million Indian immigrants, I'm sure you can find hundreds of people that are that have problems at this current point in time that need to be solved.
Okay, makes sense.
Did that answer your question?
No, it did.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, I was thinking it's. I mean, I remember in the introduction, Abin mentioned that you are mostly trying to. I mean, I don't know if it's an accurate statement, but you're mostly working with tech, immigrants in tech. So I was just, is there a relationship there? Is it because people in tech tend to have more of the money, or is there something more to that relationship?
I think it's primarily because you have both couples that are like both members of a couple that are like high earning, and there's a lot more complexity that comes in with like tech, like working in tech, because you get stock options, you get like RSUs with stock units, and then
Yeah.
you have to do a bunch of planning around that. Whereas just getting paid a straight salary and nothing else, it's a lot simpler. Like I'll definitely talk to these people. I don't want to disqualify them, but they like the playbook is fairly straightforward, right?
That actually makes sense and answers my question. Yeah. Okay. So switching gears a little bit, right? So, I mean, obviously, entrepreneurial life is crazy. You are doing like 300 things every minute, which is how it should be, right? But you also mentioned that you recently got married. How do you maintain that balance between, being a ambitious immigrant looking to achieve something in the U.S. and help other immigrants through an amazing business where there's a need, where
Mm.
you're actively looking for a market, as well as balancing out a new marriage and working out the personal side of your life.
So I've been married for 5 years. I don't
Oh,
know if
okay.
Oh, yeah, well and truly, we are like you have. I mean, bypassed the both of us.
Yeah.
Vivek got married last year. I am yet to be married, so it's like you
yeah,
have a lot on.
yeah.
You have a lot of
I'm
experience.
coming up on
Mm,
5 years in January.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But
mm,
yeah,
mm.
I mean, I think the relationship just kind of happened in parallel to the business. I think I've been talking to my then girlfriend in tandem when I went through the certification process to become a planner, and as I thought about this, because I had a lot of free time at my job, at my previous job, and she's kind of seen the evolution, and she's supported me a lot. And I think the idea is really to have boundaries, but like understand that work comes in seasons, right? Like it's not like there is 8 hours of work a day. There are periods where you have no work, and there'll be periods that you have just meetings till 8, 9 o'clock every day. So recognize that you're having an equal share of work in the relationship, like doing stuff at home and helping out because I work from home, and at the same time like understanding and relaying to your partner the expectations in case you need help around certain days. I think has gone a long way towards ensuring that we're able to find the right balance. And I'm somebody who's big on not trying to go so hard that you're just ignoring all other aspects of life and trying to find a balance between taking the right amount of time off and working to build a business that works for me rather than being controlled by a business. So I'm being very conscious in the fact that I am growing slowly as opposed to like blitz scaling the way some Silicon Valley startups do.
Yeah. Also there's an inherent, I mean, given the fact that the way US generally operates, you have this concept of a double income, right? So,
Hmm.
given the fact that it's a double income, as well as you've been married a few years, so I assume you started this business around the time you got married, or maybe a little after. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah, yeah. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
so I was just saying at that point in time, the opportunity cost for you would have been high, because
yeah.
there would have been a point where you weren't
Hmm.
making as much in the business, but you had a high opportunity cost had you
Yeah.
continued with employment, right?
Hmm.
So I think at that point in time, it's so important to have a supportive partner, because if
Yeah.
your partner isn't supportive at that point, it's really
Yeah.
difficult for to rationalize it as a household that, hey, I'm going to be
Absolutely.
making this much less because I believe that there's potential through this business to make that much more.
Yep.
So I mean, I think having a supportive partner is so super important, and it's amazing that you're able to find that with your wife.
I got very lucky. But yeah, I think the other part of that equation is also not having debt, right? Like I could have gone, bought a house, bought a car on loan, like, and then just had a bunch of other stuff that would have prevented me from um, starting like a business where the opportunity cost is very high, and I didn't do all of those things. Where like I like we as a couple had had shared alignment on like being freedom being one of the like important core tenets of what we wanted to do in our life, like not being really tied down, being able to take trips, and at the same time like having flexibility, because we got married and then we moved 3 times in 3 years. So a lot of that is also, understanding the finance side of it, where you're not taking on additional liabilities.
Yeah, I got married last year and I have moved 2 times this year already. So I know how you feel.
It's a lot. We
Yeah.
we threw out our boxes this year because we're like, oh, we've been in the same place for like the last 3 years, and then we're like, as we're throwing the boxes out, we're like, oh yeah, so we're throwing these boxes out, which means we're going to move very soon. It's not happened yet, so let's hope that we stay here for another year
With
or so.
Yeah, I hope you don't have to move. Moving is an exhausting process, and just
Mm.
it's never fun. But speaking of co-tenants, like you mentioned, yeah, you're a first generation immigrant. You
Mhm.
moved for college. Uh, how how do you shape your value system? What are some of the core principles you've adopted in your life that you would like to build your future around? And this could just be from your time back in school to growing up in India and to moving to the US and then
Yeah.
discovering something new about yourself.
Mhm.
Uh, just share some light on that.
This is an exercise I do with my clients. Um, so it's funny that I'm being put in the hot seat today. But I think one of the main ideas is that nobody wakes up with a financial planning problem, is what I tell people, right? you
Yes.
you wake up because you have a certain problem that needs to be solved, and like, if you ask people on their deathbed, what is it that you regret, the biggest regret seems to be like, I worked too much, I didn't spend enough time for family. I've personally seen how hard my dad and my mom have worked, and one of the things is to enjoy that, like, enjoy being given the privileges that I've been given, right? Which is the ability to have flexibility and the ability to be able to spend more time with folks that, like, my grandparents, my parents that live in India. So one of the key tenets of this is like having the flexibility or the ability to like go spend more than 15 days a year in India, so that you're able to spend time with parents and grandparents and things like that. And then the other big thing is just having flexibility, or just having as little, having very little that ties you down in some sense, where you have the ability, like, I would love to explore a digital nomad lifestyle where we are like working and traveling at the same time, and that's something that we want to explore a little more. I know we've been doing a lot of travel this year, so it's been clicking in parts, and at the same time, there's a lot more to experiment. And then the third thing is to say, give back to society. One of the ideas of like working with immigrants was uh, to obviously help the diaspora, but in some in some way, the way I justify it to myself is, where if we're able to help people get really clear on their values, and they are able to go do more things that they love, which might be charity, which might be moving back to India and starting a business, you're boosting you're boosting charitable giving in some way, you're boosting the Indian economy in some way. So, like, helping people get clarity is something that, or giving back is something that I want to do in a big way, and this seems to scratch that itch for me.
Awesome. We've spoken a lot about your business, but I still,
Yeah.
want to ask you probably one more question.
Hmm.
So, how? I mean, in terms of your market, in terms of approaching your market, do you have an elevator pitch? We would love, and if so, we would love to hear it. That's the first part of the question.
Yeah.
The second part of the question is, I'm actually going to put you on the hot seat one more time, and I'm going to ask you for some free advice. Not free advice, but more about, I want your opinion on something, on an
Yeah.
asset class. So, what do you? I would love to hear your thoughts on home ownership in the U.S., particularly today.
Land. So, landmine of a question. Yeah. So I don't have an elevator pitch. The idea is really, do a lot of education and put out a lot of good. I'm trying to put out more content for people that will never pay me and like still need help understanding and navigating the US financial system. At the same time, if there are people that see that and are attracted my to my services and me, like, they can come and have a chat. So nothing formal over there, but in terms of real estate, one of the biggest that's one of the biggest topics that I talk with almost all people across the board, because coming from India, there is an inherent distrust of equity markets or the stock market, because everybody has a relative that has lost money trading in the stock market. So it's a relatively new concept, whereas owning a home or owning land has been around for generations. In the US, the approach is kind of the same, where a lot of people don't trust the stock market but have built their wealth through real estate. But it goes back to the question of what is really important to you. Why is home ownership important to you? Is it important because it's something that you feel is a core tenet, where I've spoken to somebody who said they were not house secure growing up, and they felt that they could lose their house, and so one of the big things of feeling like they made it was owning a house. And then with Indians, there's like the thing of like, okay, I've just been told that real estate is a good and safe investment, so I'm going to buy it, right? So I think getting clarity on where the person stands is very important before you make a recommendation. I personally do not care for homeownership. I'm pro renting in a big way, because rent is the maximum money that you will pay, and your mortgage is actually the minimum amount of money that you pay. And you have flexibility, right? I can rent here in the US for 6 months. I can rent in India for 6 months. I can rent in Paris for the next, like the subsequent year. So having that optionality and having that flexibility is very important to me, and because of that, like I tell people, renting makes more sense. But it really goes back to your individual goals.
I agree with you as well. It's the I think the emotional part of it, which is what you alluded to in the first part of your answer, is unfortunately what is the overpowering force in case of home ownership, which makes it a very interesting debate. Which is why I picked that asset class to ask you a question on, because I don't think people are emotional about how much money they put into a 401k or a Roth, but they are emotional about about home ownership.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, for a lot of people, they don't have the discipline of like saving and putting money away each month, which a house or an insurance policy forces you to do. So
You
if
to
you
do
struggle with
exactly.
saving, and like you are not able to like dedicate that $200 or $300 a month to put away into your investments, buying a house makes a lot of sense, because it will force you to put money into something that will appreciate and
Yeah.
has you build equity over time. And if you look at the US, especially, like almost all people in the Black community are that have like positive net worth do so mostly because they have bought a house, and like they have no other kind of means of savings and things like that. So your home is really your first home is really a an emotional decision. But I want
Mhm.
people to get clear on what is the driving emotion, whether it's yeah.
But in terms of investing in real estate, for not for occupying it, but more for as an investment class, do you
Mhm.
think it's there are better asset classes out there, or do you think there's something to it?
There's no one way to get rich, and I've met people that do it in certain markets where it makes a lot of sense, like Alabama or Tennessee, right? But it really depends on what you're willing to spend time learning, right? I tell people, like, equity markets, fairly simple, 100-year data, and if you're able to just set that automatic deduction from your paycheck each 2 weeks, and you do that for 60 years straight, like, or 40 years straight, you are golden.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you're willing to spend that time and learn how real estate markets work, and are willing to maybe lose a little bit of money, then go for it. Like, it's something that definitely I've seen people build wealth from.
Got it.
It's generally down to how risk averse they're willing to be,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of that's more than anything else. You were talking about houses and it being an emotional decision, and I like I'm one of the lucky few that I mean I grew up in a
Mhm.
household where we didn't have to worry about rent, but I know there are certain households
Yeah.
out there that worry that okay, I'd have to uproot my family
Mhm.
because let's say someone comes in and like something goes wrong. So it's a very like explaining to homeowners that okay, this can be like rent is probably the way forward, but but trying to pacify their concerns that they're looking to keep. They're looking for a place to call their own without having to deal with the hassles. I assume can be quite challenging.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
and the other way I've seen people do it is like, parents are forcing them to buy property. So what they end up doing is like just giving the money to their parents and like, here, you go buy it. And so as an immigrant, you end up buying a property in a Hyderabad or like in a city where your family lives, and that
Yeah.
scratches the itch. But then you have to think about the whole other aspect of like, how do you maintain this? How do you manage this? How do you monitor this sitting in the US, right? After your parents' time or whoever is doing it for you. Yeah, it's hard, which is why I don't like it. So that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can ask so many questions on this because it's an area of interest for me. But I mean, I think I'm gonna I'm gonna stop. I don't want to force you to. I don't want to put you on the hot seat and ask you a bunch of questions for which you would love to have a separate conversation about.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we're here to educate immigrants, right? So
Mm.
happy to chat.
yeah, I mean, so we are. I think the last and final question, Abhin, that I probably want to ask from my side, and of course, if you want to ask
Mhm.
anything, I think it's not even a question. It's more about. So obviously, we have a podcast for immigrants. So if let's say we have a bunch of immigrants listening right now, so Vrishin, what would be your message to them?
Yeah, I think coming from like a financial planning perspective, I think immigrants kind of lose they miss the forest for the trees because they are more worried about, earning, accumulating, setting up a good life. Having having the ability to define what is enough for you from a money standpoint, I think changes the game a lot. And we don't, as a community, we don't spend a lot of time doing that, where we understand what our lifestyle is and look at what our future projected lifestyle is, and then just look to understand how am I doing today, from a money perspective. I think gaining clarity on what is important to you and how you can use the money to live the lifestyle that you want today goes a long way towards enhancing your immigrant experience. And if I were to give people one takeaway, I think it would be just that: define what enough looks like for you.
That's awesome.
With I think that's more or less everything that I had as well. So, so Vishen, this was a great time. Thank you for coming on. We had a really nice time. I did not realize you were back in the US
Yeah,
because we would have probably scheduled this at a later time. Because
Yeah.
this is really convenient for me because I'm currently in India. So you boys have woken up at 6 a.m. in the morning to do this. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, I was telling Vivek, actually, we were scheduled to chat last week, and I was in India, and I actually just
Yes. Yeah.
I flew back into the US yesterday morning. So I figured this slot works because I'd probably be jet lagged.
yeah, that
So
makes
I woke
sense.
up.
That makes sense.
It's all
If
good.
yeah, but if we had known, we would have changed the time. But it's good. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
glad that we had. I really enjoyed this conversation. Learned a bunch. It's a good reinforcement, and of course, I just enjoyed having a really good conversation with you. So thank you for being on the show. It was an amazing episode. Personally, took a lot from it. Learned a bunch. Have a bunch of questions to ask my wife after this about some of the financial planning that we do. But this is really helpful, Vishen. Thank you for being a guest with us.
No, absolutely. It's a pleasure talking to you both, and like, thank you for making this happen, Abhin and Vivek. If you feel like your audience has more questions finance wise, maybe we can do a follow up episode where we just talk about finance concepts. So happy
That's
to
that's
happy to
that's
chat.
great. You'd be surprised how useful that would be. Right? You know your target
Yeah,
audience, so you know how useful that would
yeah,
be. But before we let you go,
Mhm.
where can people find you?
Yeah. I have my own, like, I try to educate people mostly on LinkedIn. So if you are
Mhm.
looking for financial advice being an immigrant in the country, follow me on LinkedIn. And then I have my website and my email, which we can link in the show notes.
Yeah,
And that's
Yes,
pretty much the best way to get in touch with me.
awesome.
awesome.
Okay, I will do that. Yeah, and until then, this has been a great episode. Once again, Vishen, thank you so much, and we'll all see you on the next one. Take care, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.